Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
So tonight is the 16th of December, 2020, and we are talking about Chapter 4 in A Blueprint of Enlightenment. The need for selfless practice of the way. So before we enter the chapter, although I think something that I want to say is deeply related to the chapter, I want to talk about what is mind. And that comes out, I think, from last week's discussion, where it was maybe referred to, but not discussed.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the most important pieces to understand in all of this, and one of the most difficult. And it comes up because some of us say, well, when I sit Zazen, my mind is going on, my mind is racing, and all of these thoughts are coming into my mind. And I want to say that that's not what the mind is. It may be that the brain is exuding all kinds of words, because that's what the brain does. The brain is supposed to do that. But that is not what mind is. In the same way that we talk about eyes as a function and seeing as something that does not personally belong to us, but belongs to all of life. And so it is not a personal ability. Mind is the same. Mind is not a personal, there's no my mind. We are all alive and embedded in mind. Mind is a function of life. It is also infinite in the way that Gien Roshi was talking about eyes, about seeing as being infinite. There is no difference between body and mind. It isn't as though I have a mind somewhere and a body. These are the same thing. The body, all of material life is insubstantial. So we are these functionings of life. We are the function of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. And we are insubstantial. Material is insubstantial. And this is a really, really important realization. Otherwise, we go about, maybe we get the eyes, maybe we get that, but we continue to think that my mind is doing something. It's my mind. And that is a misunderstanding. You're simply mind. When we sit with that, when we sit with this question that we are sitting in the totality of mind, with the myriad, infinite manifestations of mind, is what we are in the midst of. Everything we see is the infinite manifestation of mind. So mind isn't something that we think up, or that we think of, or that we engage in thinking. Mind is this infinite realm of life. Of course, we have the ability to recognize things, to recognize whatever it is we see or we hear, taste, touch, smell. Of course, we can recognize. And we have to be able to do that to also function. But whatever we see is the manifestation of mind. Myriad manifestations. And they are not owned by us at all. So when we sit thinking, we could say that when we sit thinking and we think, oh, my mind is running around, we are really embedded in the relative world. And we have to be able to lift ourselves into something much more vast and larger than the notion of I, myself, and I. If for a moment, when we are sitting zazen, we can realize everything around us is the appearance of the Dharma, the great mind of Dharma. Maybe we have a chance to step outside of ourselves, to step out of the notion that my thinking is my mind. It just is not. I think in the chapter, the need for selfless practice of the way is once again Dōgen Zenji and Gien Roshi both trying to point that way toward the idea that we are mind-lived. Just great mind. Bodhidharma says there's just mind. There's mind. And Dōgen Zenji is so difficult. He's speaking, in medieval Japanese, and then it's translated into contemporary Japanese, and then translated into English. And so we are removed from the inferences of some of his illusions, and so it's difficult for us to grasp just what he is getting at. But he does say, the minds of Buddhist trainees, like those of most people these days, are far from understanding the way. They do that which others praise, even though they know it to be false. So when he also says, the penetrating eyes of the Buddhas and patriarchs are constantly illuminating the entire universe. So he is saying that the Buddhas and our ancestors, as they see, illuminate the Dharma, as they see the Dharma, they see as the Dharma. And that seeing is the entire universe. Mind is the entire universe. Not owned, but shared. It's something we are all doing. And right at this very moment, we are mind. We are sitting in mind, of mind. Our mind. Mind is. So I wanted to say this just to clear up just a few things that were said last week that I thought were that we might have said that maybe led others to believe that mind was something different from what I truly believe Dōgen's teaching is about. And Dōgen is pointing toward.
Edo-san?
Yes.
Clarification?
Yeah.
Are you saying that manifestations of seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, etc. are mind?
Yes.
Okay. And mind is nothing else but that.
Yeah. Mind is existence. We are existence. So we can let go of the nature of ego because it is so it is so small in its nature in itself that it prevents us from the realization from the great breadth of being the manifestations. We are a manifestation also. And we are infinite. And all of mind has to be seen as infinite. All of existence is the infinite manifestation of mind.
I have a question, Edo-san. If the ego gets in the way of us having or being or in the full manifestation, what is the purpose of the ego then? Because it's preventing us from.
There is a point in life where the ego is no longer necessary. I have said many times in the past that for young people growing up, the ego is necessary to prevent us from doing stupid things. And we're also, it's something that we get programmed to believe is important, or that we must have a healthy ego, or that we must have good self-esteem. And we are talking about something entirely different. There's a point where you no longer, anybody who is here, every single person I am looking at in this grid is old enough that the ego should be gone. It's not, you don't need it anymore. It's a prevention of a great opening to vast consciousness, vast emptiness.
Thank you.
Just drop it. Just drop it. I mean, in Zen practice, we don't do psychology. It's not psychology. We must have a healthy psychology. But for us at this point, a healthy psychology is to drop the ego. That's what I say.
That was something I wondered about, whether we needed to have a healthy ego before we could drop it. It's like, that's doing too much, isn't it, really, to think of it that way? Oh, thank you.
Well, no, I have said before that we must make sure that we have psychologically progressed enough so that we are not operating from unconscious trauma. We should not be. We should at this point in our stage, we should have looked at our growing up traumas, the traumas that we had as we were infants or children, or any other traumas that came in our history should be examined, looked at, and understood so that we don't act unconsciously from a point of trauma. I said that we must do that. And then it's done. You've done your work, so drop it and go forward. Don't need it. Don't need it at some point.
Eero-san?
Yes.
I felt also, and I thought you picked just the point of what was missing a bit not missing, but not quite to the point last week, which I enjoyed. But I think you picked up on exactly that, especially in although it didn't come up in this way, but the description in the Shingyo, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, that's just function.
Right.
And I'm reminded of I've forgotten where it is exactly, but there's perhaps accompanying one of the old koans, which says that the entire universe is the eye of a monk. But I wanted to ask a question about what you said, in that you mentioned specifically life, and often in Buddhist teachings, there's talk of sentient beings.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. But is that necessary? I mean, the mind seems to, that you're speaking about, does it not also exist regardless of life? That is, there wasn't always life. There was circumstances, and we think long time when life didn't exist. Something was happening that became more and more complex.
Well, that is suppositional. We don't know that. We don't know that any more than we know how we got born.
Well, I'm not an expert on it, but I think evolution points that way. And would it make a difference to Buddhist understanding? Because whether or not there's so-called sentient beings, things are impressing on each other. If you put a rock on a table, the table knows the rock is there.
So what exactly is your question then? I'm getting a little bit lost in this. So
the question is, the word mind is connected in what you spoke of, and seems to be occasionally in Buddhist writings with life and with being sentient.
Okay.
And it seems that everything is sentient, and when they interact, one thing impinges on another, and it has some effect on the other, however you want to measure it or describe it. But that doesn't require what we think of as mind or living beings.
Oh, no, to me, the rock is mind. Everything is mind.
Is mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
So life in a sense is an extra word that's not needed.
Perhaps you could say that. You could say that. My point is to try and get people to realize this. So I tried to say the word life, to say, to bring somebody around to that realization. That's all. Yeah. But we could say that there has only ever been mind. And that will always be the case. So there is no birth, there is no death. There's just mind.
Mm. That's what I was asking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Jerry, is the way that you use life in that question synonymous with consciousness?
You're speaking to me?
Yes.
I was for me, the word is something that we all relate to easily, but I didn't think it was necessary for the concept of mind that Edo-san was describing. That is, I don't know. Consciousness is a harder problem than I've got to exactly. There are these interactions, and the best I can do with response to what you asked is the Shin-Yo, where there's no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, but everything is happening. It's just that there isn't some kind of what you're calling consciousness behind it. If I've misspoke, I hope Edo-san will correct me.
Well, we don't know what consciousness is yet. We haven't come to be able to exactly describe it or to truly understand consciousness. We can only perhaps grow in it. Hopefully, grow in it and open it. But at this point, we don't know conscious, don't know what it is.
Are we talking? Oh, go ahead.
But as we talk about no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, that is, of course, pre-perception, that is emptiness itself, and speaking. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue. That is emptiness. So, perhaps we will come to understand that pure consciousness is emptiness. I don't know. Allison, yeah.
I was my take on this talk about mind is that it's intimately related with direct experience. Correct. I mean, when we talk about the theories of evolution or scientific facts, we're talking about intellectual things that we're thinking about. And it's like when Kanda Roshi said, look over there, and then turn and look over there. And that is the Dharma, that is mind. And that is directly experienced. It's seeing, hearing. And I think that, I don't know, for me, we're talking about two different things when we're talking about concepts and things that we have learned, and which may or may not be true, but all I have is my direct experience of life, my living experience. That's really, and I think Kanda Roshi, and I can't remember which, or Gien Roshi, I don't remember which chapter, when he was talking about the activity of the Dharma, is here for each of us. I mean, this is where it's happening, and this is where the seeing, and for each of us, you can be looking over there, I'll be looking over here. We're each seeing the Dharma. We're each seeing. So I don't know if I'm just muddling everything up, but for me, there's a difference between the direct experience and theoretical propositions.
Very, very definitely there's a difference. For certain there's a difference. And when Inoue Roshi talks about the dojo, so this is the dojo, this is the place of practice, the do, the place, the jo, the practice place. It also means that this is the expansion of the universe, which takes place in this dojo. Where consciousness opens in this dojo. So the work, as we see in this particular chapter, this work belongs here with this. Nobody else can transmit to you awakening. We can transmit the precepts. We can transmit the forms. We can transmit the teaching. We cannot transmit awakening. It is the job of each one to do. It can't be done because that opening must occur in that dojo, all the dojos of the whole world is what must open. I mean, nobody else can make you realize. It must be done with this work, this dojo. And this dojo also is infinite and capable of the totality of the expansion of the entire universe.
So that brings me to what Amer said also, or no, maybe it was Jerry. The monk, the entire world is in the eye of the monk. I forget who said that, but yes.
The whole universe is the eye of the monk.
Right, yeah. So when we each die, this universe dies because there is no longer the appearance of this particularity. We are also particularities. We're each a different snowdrop, a snowflake. I mean, isn't it incredible to think that billions of snowflakes are all different? That is just unfathomable. And the unfathomable light of the Dharma is what we are. Each person a different snowflake. So this particularity must be expressed in the totality of the Buddha Dharma. And to be the Buddha Dharma, to be the Buddha is to be that totality, is what practice is asking of us.
There are many, many phrases in the Hanyahara Mito Shinyo that I haven't a clue what's being said, what's being described, but one of them is no realm of mind consciousness. And I think this talk perhaps helps me understand that there's no realm because it is beyond a realm. A realm is a finite entity, and consciousness is infinite.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so exciting, isn't it? Isn't it so exciting?
Yes, it is. It's very exciting.
I mean, so this is why the Buddha and all the ancestors can say, what a rare opportunity we have been given to be alive, to be awake in this. A little bit, the text, the text has these brackets around body, particularly in this chapter. And a little bit, I am not certain that this is exactly correct, because when Gien Roshi is saying this, he is saying this appearance of the totality of existence. He's not just saying, oh, this body with a head and bones and arms and legs. He is saying this appearance in the totality of heart, mind. The Japanese word for shin is this and this put together. This and this put together is one word. And we don't have that in English, that unless you know of a word that makes that one. Shin is the word, heart, mind. So it encompasses the totality of the mind-body construct. And it doesn't leave out the mind or the heart-body. And we don't have that. So we always say, oh, the body and mind, as though they are two different things. And mind is the function, I'm going to say, of life again. We are within and of and it and are mind.
Hiro-san,
Yes.
I'm just trying to put all this in my own words, but it sounds like mind is ultimately just the functioning of things, the functioning of the universe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that when they talk about the mind of practice, they're talking about our directly experiencing the functioning of things, period. Nothing else. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's obvious, it's clear to me more and more that even when I am experiencing things, I'm experiencing them in some ways for consistency with some preconceived notion of how they're supposed to be, how it's supposed to happen. And I find myself doing that yeah. Okay.
Stop.
Stop. Yes. Stop it.
Stop it. Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
When you catch yourself doing that, this is also a habitual form of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So one has to take a look at this and be conscious of what is entering, one's immediate situation. And so when you discover yourself thinking about that, you have to say, wait a minute, stop. And stand back and allow mind to be mind,
Mm-hmm.
which is far larger and more encompassing than any of the thoughts that we might bring to it.
So perhaps when we say, I'm losing my mind, maybe we're really getting the mind.
It's right. Well, I mean, the thing is, mind cannot be lost. It simply cannot be lost. And I think there's the it's not a koan, but it's a story. Somebody comes into the Dokusan room and says to the teacher, "I'm losing my mind. I need help. I'm losing my mind." And the teacher says, "Show me your mind." And of course, you cannot show your mind. So the person has a realization then and realizes, oh, I can't lose my mind. We can't. Yeah. Even if someone is mentally ill, they cannot lose their mind. It's an aberration. It's a I don't know what to call it. I mean, certainly there is such a thing as mental illness, where somebody has gotten so far off base that they cannot relate any longer to take care of themselves appropriately. And so that order has to be brought back to somebody to be stabilized. No doubt about that. But we cannot ever say that the person has lost their mind. It's impossible. There's no such thing. And sometimes those who are in a situation of mental illness, the so-called mental illness, are far more conscious and aware than most of us. People have great insight and think differently when they suffer from, what's the one that goes left and right? What's the one that goes
bipolar? You mean bipolar?
Yeah, bipolar. I always forget the names of these things, but they reach very great extremes and see the world with a realism that most of us cannot see. Or even schizophrenics may see the world in ways because we can't see that. But we still cannot say they are out of their minds.
One of the psychiatrists I worked with who we took care of allegedly mentally ill children, would say, Gilda, don't say bipolar, say tripolar, quadpole. We don't know how many poles there are. He was a very wise person.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think we're all bipolar up to some degree. We're polar. We're multipolar, that's for sure. I think we are.
Non-polar.
Some kinds of tendencies. What, Amir, you were going to say?
I said non-polar.
Oh, okay. There's non-polar. There's not that too. Yeah. But mostly we call it that mental illness because we don't share the ability to function in that way. So we call it an aberration of some kind. But granted, there are people who need help, psychological help. There's no doubt about that. And I don't mean to suggest that that's not real. It is real. So, yeah. So, so that again, the topic, for tonight, the need for selfless practice of the way is once again the need for us to abandon the ego or to let the ego slough off, slide away. It's done its duty, it's done its job, it has done what it's needed to do. We can let it fall away because then we can truly enter selfless practice. Once that drops off, then practice really begins. And maybe it's the ego that practices with the intention of gaining something. This is important in this chapter about the need to, the importance of practicing without the intention of gaining or, by fame or fortune. And so there's nothing to be gained for ourselves because the self is not what is truly practicing. It's the selfless act that has no need to gain. And again, if we can let the ego fall away, we discover everything that we have always been that is completely content, that is itself, does not need to have to be anything other than itself, is, can act with courage and is capable then of enjoying the talents that were given to one for whatever one's talents might be. We also have talents to act in a particular way. So the dropping off of the ego doesn't mean that you aren't still going to do art, or that you aren't going to write poetry, or that you aren't going to garden and do all of those things. Of course you are. But now you drop that off, you let it fall off, and you do all of that in an entirely conscious and happy way, a delighted way, a fulfilling way. You will never see beyond your horizon if you do not. You will never see the unrestricted whole. So in letting the ego drop off, we become unrestricted. We can become the vast, open self that we are.
Edo-san?
Yes.
I thought it was really interesting that he uses the term artifice when he says that having intention to get something is just a human artifice. And I didn't know what that word was, so I looked it up, and it means like a clever trick or a strategy.
Yes.
And so it made me think about when I was very young. I used to like to go fishing, and I would convince myself that if I didn't think about catching a fish, I would be more likely to catch a fish. So, so if I thought, anyway, the whole thing was a ploy, right? There was still an intention, but I tried to take the intention consciously out of the picture. So anyway, in the same way, trying to get something, doing Zazen by, trying to convince yourself that you're not after something when you really are at a different level. I don't know. Sometimes some of us get trapped with those types of scenarios.
Oh, easily, very easily. Especially something like fishing. I mean, oh my goodness, to drop a line in the lake and not think about catching something is that's pretty hard to do. Pretty hard to do, but I think I remember, didn't Coben talk about fishing? I think he would talk about waiting for the fish to catch me.
I don't remember.
Like that. I mean, that's what happens, is the fish maybe nuzzles around at that worm and catches us, is what might happen. But we can't even think about the possibility of it's happening. So it's fishing is a hard one. Very hard one. But both of my son and my daughter-in-law both are fly fisher people, and they do catch and release. But there is also, the joy of the reel and the cast off, the expert cast off that a little bit saves you from the idea of the fish catching on, because it's the moving of the reel and the flying of that line into the water that is so exciting. And so they just keep doing that back and forth. Maybe they catch something, and if they do, they release it. So fly fishing, I think, maybe helps you get away from thinking you'll catch something. Whereas if you're sitting in a rowboat with the rod over the line, that's hard. But with so many things in life, to think that we won't get something is very, very difficult. Allison will speak to that in painting, that you hope that you will, succeed in a painting, and you hope that you want that, and yet you don't necessarily get that. And the lesson in that is, again and again, we do that over and over and over, since I also paint. I know that problem. Over and over you paint, and maybe I'll get it this time. And then you just give it up and you paint something and it's great.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, it's like when we sit zazen. I came to this practice because I wanted to awaken. So there's an intention there. And that intention walks with me right up to the cushion, and I sit down, but actually in zazen itself, there is no intention. There's just being. So that it's not that a thought can't come through, thoughts come through, but it's just that openness of being, and the intention is gone at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allison, earlier in the book, isn't that exactly what was called the Bodhi mind? What pushed you to, what motivated or propelled you here,
Right.
and continues to?
Something brings us to practice, yes, and whatever that is, yeah.
Well, that deep hunger is that deep bodhicitta seed that, lures us to a place of practice that will be a place that can hold us while we slowly realize and open and awaken. So indeed, Mir, it is the bodhicitta that seed sits in us.
Hiro-san?
Yes.
I was thinking of returning to this fascicle,
Yes.
selflessness, and I partly it's a question, but several places throughout this chapter there's a question of selflessness. For example, later on he says, "Well, you don't practice for the sake of other people or for." It's phrased in a funny way actually in this book. So if you don't read it carefully, it's very quizzical. But at the end, it says basically you don't practice. And the same thing throughout this chapter. He talks about basically if you should follow someone who has the experience.
Yes.
And if you don't, you're just going to wind up groping around in the dark.
Yes.
So now one of the aspects of this sort of thing is, for example, to follow the precepts. And one often might not feel, in their true sense, I'm not talking about being literal or doing things that are silly or conventional. I mean, to follow the precepts. And you're not always likely to do that. But you might do it anyway because of your faith in the depth of the tradition and the practice. And then there's a sense of tension in which you recognize the depth of that tradition because it contrasts with your own lack of stability. Now, maybe that goes away as you get more experience and wisdom. But there's a giving up that's involved in selfless practice, I think. Is there not a giving up? And also, when you're going on with your life and your efforts, do you sometimes just sort of hear your master or what he would do, or feel that continuity?
Yeah, this is yes.
And sort of give up to it.
Yeah. A very, very important question about we're going to come to the next chapter, to the need to seek a true master. So our transmission of the precepts And the transmission in the Dharma is a really important one in many levels. The transmission comes, as you say, in a very practical sense that, okay, I have this choice to steal something, but I won't do that because the tradition says don't do that. So the very practical sense. And then there's the sense in which the great wind of the Dharma flows through us. And we feel Tokuwo Ryoko, and we feel Ryokan, Daigu Ryokan, and we feel Katsuryu Tetsume, blowing the wind of Dharma at us because they are present in what we do in that transmission. And then there is the depth also in which the teacher sits on the shoulder and maybe is even present within us. Not that we rely on to say, oh, what should I do now? But because their Dharma is so deep, we resonate with it, that the transmission then is complete in that. So that is extremely important. That sense of understanding what the meaning of ancestor is. So yeah, and we have many teachers, all of us. We don't just have one teacher. So we receive the wisdom, and if the transmission is rich, if the transmission is rich enough to stay into this present time, to be able to be resonating in this time, then that wisdom is continually given to us, or continually opened in us, let's say, as we ourselves open to it. Is that what you were after, Jerry?
That's to the point. Yes, I was thinking, yes, it's to the point. I was thinking of the tension that, and I don't know to what extent that tension is just an immaturity. That is, ultimately, as I think Suzuki Roshi says someplace, that one's difficulties become one's helpers.
Sure.
Because they can then, if you aren't too reactive, then, and they have just a little chance, they'll give you space, they'll warn you.
Right.
Because you're so acute to them that they'll warn you, and there's enough of a space so you can then interpose and not be swept away by what's been your.
Right.
So there's in some sense that kind of a gap maybe when you're acting selflessly.
I think ultimately, the great presence of the Dharma is always with us, but I also feel that there's a point where one forgets about it also. That there's no need to run around worrying whether we are doing the Dharma or not, or even thinking about whether Buddha is present or not. We just go past that because we living in such a way that to live is to be doing, is to be reenacting the Dharma all the time. It is reenacted in all of our actions. So there isn't the need to think, oh, is this what Buddha would do, or the bracelets people wear, what would Buddha say, or something like that. We don't have to do that at some point. We let that go. At the same time, we engage in the rituals and we reenact the rituals and we reenact the ceremonies, because they also sustain us and express on high level what the transmission is, that level of the transmission. That is extremely important. So, but I think there's always a tension, maybe forever, between one thing and another. At some point, at some level, perhaps. Tension between the monastery and lay life. That's always there, that breathing in and out of the monastic life and the lay life, or the, married life or the single life. Is this life or that life? I mean, they go on forever. And so those tensions teach us, exactly as you say, teach us the correct choice for our lives.
Can I just touch on one thing before we're getting closing up here? The section, I think Amir referred to it earlier about the human artifice, but in that paragraph there, he was talking about shameful.
Yeah. Could you say what page that is and what paragraph, please?
It was page 113 and 114, the bottom of 113.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to use two different pairs of glasses, and one's computer glasses, one's for reading. So, but so hold on a minute.
What do you mean? It's shameful question. Yeah. It's shameful toward the true nature of this body, right? You should feel shameful toward the eye.
Yeah, that whole paragraph about the shameful, people from former times have verified this, and your attitude is shameful toward them. Well, beyond that, you should feel shameful toward the eye. The eye sees everything, not only what the self likes, but also what the self dislikes. And then he goes on from there. And so my question was, is he saying that in a sense, the ego has sort of co-opted the senses and then sort of co-opted the sense functions and claimed them to be itself, claimed them for the self of the ego?
Yes.
That's basically what he's saying.
That's right. Yeah. So that we fail to see the true Dharma of the activity. We fail to see the function of the true Dharma of seeing. So
it's the overlay of the likes and dislikes and the preferences and the judgments and all that is the kind of shameful aspect because it's all ego-based.
Yes. And of course,
I'm just saying this in
the word shame comes in a great deal into the Japanese culture. So in America, we see the word shame and we take great umbrage with the word shame as though we should not experience shame.
Yeah, right? No, I'm not having trouble with the word. I'm not having trouble with the word shameful. I totally understand that. There's not a lot of what somebody said recently or I read something about Zen going to the West, and the main problem was that there wasn't enough modesty here. And I think I agree with that, but I just wanted to know if that's exactly what he is saying, that the ego sort of co-ops the sense functions.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. But this question of shame, it has come up, and it came up. Is it the X generation, or is it I forget which generation took great umbrage with the word with shame, and that we must not have shame in our society. Nobody must experience shame. It's just not correct for us to feel shame. And at the same time, the behavior is so shameful. So
Yeah.
You
That
know,
started when the baby boomers came of age, you know,
a bit of the baby boomer.
70s.
Baby
You know,
boomer shame.
I'm
No,
okay, you're okay.
yeah, right.
You know, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. A shame is very deeply embedded in the Japanese culture, and Japanese suffer from shame, whereas Americans suffer from guilt. So, you know, we maybe trade back and forth on those two things. But this is a gross, you know, a gross notion of the societies. But it's a
Well, so let's say we didn't want to use the word shame then because it's kind of Japanese based or it has a different connotation in Japan. What would be a better word in that sense of the way the ego co-opts the senses? Would we say we should be embarrassed? We shouldn't be embarrassed that we're doing that all the time and not even acknowledging it?
yeah, maybe so. Maybe that for this culture, it might be a better word. I mean, shame has to do with a public issue. That is, to behave badly in public is shame. To behave inwardly with something we feel that we have done is private guilt. So they are two, one outward and one inward. And so shame holds the society together to cause it to behave well, so that you don't cause any public disruption to the society. Shame is prevalent because you would be shaming your family, or you shame, you know, so it's a public matter, whereas guilt is a private.
Oh.
And but maybe embarrassment might be a better word in that sense, possibly. Simply that here is this magnificent function, and we belittle it by our small minds. So. Friends, I think that's all I got for tonight, and I think that's all we need for tonight. I think it was good discussion. On Saturday morning, we are having a ceremony for Ryokan-san, our annual tribute and gratitude to Ryokan-san, and it will be in the morning. We sit zazen at 8 o'clock and then have ceremony. And then we will be taking a break, a winter break, from the closure tomorrow until January 1st, when we will come back and have ringing of bells and more ceremony on January 1st at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then, but the next time we come together in this format is going to be poetry night, January 6th. And that happens to be Ryokan-san's death day. So it's a lovely tribute to bring to him, January 6th. So come forward with a poem. Use what we talked about tonight to explore the possibilities of a poem and to open to something to bring. It's a wonderful night to share together and to bring a statement, a poetic statement in honor, the poem is in honor of Ryokan, but it doesn't have to be about Ryokan. A poem that of your own making, and so bring it to practice, because that will be the next time we come together next year. And what a year it has been. Oh, will we be so happy to have 2021. Put out your lights. Please bring light to the holiday. Happy Hanukkah, Jerry.
Okay.
Yeah, tomorrow is the last day, right?
Right.
Yeah, so happy Hanukkah to you and all Jews who are sharing the light of Hanukkah with everybody. This year, as I have said, it doesn't feel as though Hanukkah is just particularly Jewish. It's for everybody. And the lights of Christmas are for everybody. It's not about, the confined religious nature this year. Everybody's putting out lights to celebrate. And so let's do it. Let's put them out and get on and go to 2021 in great hope and light and change and what have you. So, yeah. All right. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Lovely evening with you.
Oh.